I rarely review gear that costs over $1,000. I have lots of such products, but I know you can find great value under $1,000. Every once in a while, someone asks me for a recommendation and they don't want to consider anything under a particular price. Sometimes people just want to buy something over $1,000. Alright, I can understand that. Sendy Audio contacted me and asked if I wanted to review their newest headphone, the Peacock. Frankly, I didn't know this thing existed until Sendy mentioned it. Of course, I said yes. Sendy loaned me the Peacock to review. The Peacock costs $1,500 and is clearly their flagship product. Sendy Audio wants this headphone to compete with the big boys in the same price category. Is the Peacock a worthy competitor in this price range, or, as some have suggested, a waste of time? Sendy Audio's first Uber Premium headphone is a huge departure from their previous offerings. This is easily double the cost of the Ava. Sendy says that the Peacock is made from double magnets, double coils on each side of the diaphragm. This design is supposed to result in low distortion, according to Sendy's marketing. And they also said that it will provide good consistency with high music reproduction ability, which makes a real feeling of listening music in a living concert. End quote. I have no idea what that means. Sendy says that their driver design took 2 years to perfect. They claim that the Peacock will present warm vocals, solid bass without a loss of depth and elasticity, and the treble is bright, transparent, and slim. They also say that the Peacock's tuning will, quote, eliminate the feeling of pressure and harshness from the treble. Sendy told me that their measured distortion is less than 0.03% on the Peacock. The LCD-X and LCD-3 supposedly have distortion measured at less than 0.1%. The meze Empyrean claims the same. I don't know how any of these measurements were achieved and whether the methodology is the similar type or not. But if numbers are an indication, then clearly the Peacock has some of the lowest measured distortion of large planar headphones that I've seen. Ultimately, Sendy's marketing is typical for a hi-fi company. There's a healthy dose of technical superiority and very little information on sound. Sendy says that the Peacock is made from premium materials. From the outset, you can tell there's a striking similarity between the Peacock's design and that of the Sivka Phoenix, and some similarities with the Sendy Ava. I've examined all three headphones closely, and it seems as though Sendy Audio decided to keep the overall headband structure the same throughout. Of course, while the concept is similar, the Peacock is definitely larger. The Peacock is made of metal, wood, and leather. The headband has very little padding, but it is among the most supple I've felt. Sendy says they used goatskin leather. The ear pads are huge and fully engulf my ears. These are also made of goatskin and have memory foam inserts. The ear pads are removable, just like those of the Sendy Ava and the Sivka Phoenix. The ear pads among these three headphones are not interchangeable. You have to buy ear pads specifically for each headphone. Here's a doozy. All the metal stuff on the headphone, which looks like gold, is actually 24 karat gold plating. The ear cup housing is wood. Unfortunately, I could not find information about the type of wood used. There's laser etching on the wood. The Peacock comes with a fair bit of accessories. You get a mini XLR cable with a 4.4mm balanced connection. This cable is gold and copper, pliable and prone to a little bit of microphonics. The packaging also contains a 4.4mm to 1/4 inch and a 4.4mm to XLR adapters. The headphone comes with an all-leather protective case. This is unique to the Peacock. All the other Sendy-related headphones come with a similar-looking case that's made of different materials. Unfortunately, Sendy Audio does not include a spare set of earpads in the packaging. As for comfort, the Peacock is a pretty hefty headphone. It's heavy in the hand, and you can certainly feel the weight on your head. It's not quite as heavy as the LCD-3, the LCD-X, or the LCD-XC, but the Peacock is a far cry heavier than the Ava and the Phoenix. The Peacock has tight clamp. It's not painful, but you will feel the pressure on the side of your face. Luckily, the ear pads have horizontal movement to help mitigate some of the clamping force. The ear pads fully enclose my ears. I've read some complaints that the Peacock does not fully seal, but that's not my experience. The very bottom of the earpads do not touch my face, but the earpads do in fact fully enclose and seal around my ears. If you look at the earpad design, you'll notice that if your ears fit inside the rectangular holes, then you'll get a seal. I tried different positions and found that if I wore the headphones in a way that the earpads sat on top of my ears, for example on top of my earlobes, then there would not be a seal. But that's not really how these headphones were designed to be worn. I could wear the Peacock for 2 hours at a time before needing a break. The weight is not an issue for me, but the clamping pressure does become a bit tiring. After a short break, I can use the headphones again for another 2 hours at a time. Overall, the Peacock is indeed a luxury headphone. In looks, build, and accessories, Sendy Audio seems to have taken things to a new level for them. It's obvious that not everyone will like the design. The 24-karat accents are a little ostentatious, if you ask me, but they're meant to be eye-catching, so I suppose the design is successful in that sense. You can tell that Sendy Audio did put thought into the overall design. It is rare to buy a headphone in this price range and be given proper accessories. Audeze and Sennheiser, for example, tend to include their jankiest cables with their headphones. Particularly with Audeze, no matter which large LCD headphone you buy, you'll get the same plastic sheath microphonic cable, even if you buy the LCD4. It's also nice to see a large format planar headphone come with a reasonable carrying case. Using Audeze as an example again, because they deserve ridicule for being cheap with their accessories, if you buy a large LCD headphone, you'll either get a huge industrial plastic case or nothing at all. The meze Empyrean comes in a briefcase. The $2,000 headphone has no protective case at all. But I do have a gripe about the Peacock. It's the same one I keep mentioning with all headphones. I really wish Sendy Audio had included a spare set of earpads. Guys, when we pay this amount of money, it's good customer service to give us an extra pair of earpads. We don't know when Sendy Audio will discontinue this headphone and will stop providing its accessories. And because Sendy purposefully uses proprietary earpads, we have to have a spare set in the box from the get-go. It's just good business. This is one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm a little bit annoyed that for $1,500, Sendy Audio couldn't get this right. To test the sound signature of the Peacock, I used various devices. This included my RME 80i2 DAC, my Modi Liquid Spark stack, the Low2 PAW S1, the Earman TR amp, and the hifi Pro iCan and Pro iDSD stack. I used the stock accessories. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD. The Peacock is a 50-ohm headphone with a sensitivity of about 103 decibels. Sendy Audio does not specify how much minimum power the Peacock needs or how much we should give it for peak performance. Other manufacturers, Audeze, Avantone, Beyerdynamic, Sennheiser, do provide such details in their marketing or manuals. I reached out to Sendy Audio and asked about this. They told me that the Peacock does not need any specific amount of power for peak performance. I don't think that's true. In my tests, I found that using a simple dongle DAC, such as the Eco ITM03, gave a noticeably different experience than, say, the Low2 PAW S1. Further, I could hear a slight difference between the PAW S1 and a more powerful amplifier. The difference here was in a few ways. The more power my source had, the clearer the Peacock sounded, and the more separation and harder impact I heard with drums. Some of this could be attributed to imperfect volume matching, I admit. Anyway, I think you'll need an amplifier with the Peacock if you want the drivers to perform at peak. I am guessing, but I think anything above 150 milliwatts should be sufficient. But my rule of thumb is 250 milliwatts for large planar magnetic drivers. Sendy Audio says something about the Peacock having elastic bass. I don't know what that means. My experience with the Peacock indicates that this headphone has a sub-bass roll-off but fairly neutral mid-bass. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, there's a sub-bass rumble from the beginning of the song. This is supposed to reverberate. The Peacock presented the rumbling sound, but it was distant and had quick transients. Its performance in this regard was very much in line with other planar magnetic headphones. When the crescendo hit, the organ cut through the other instruments. There was good separation among all instrument group sets, resulting in at least average clarity. The rolling thunder effect at this point was audible, but still not fully represented. When the vocals chimed in, they rose from the background until they were slightly ahead of the instruments. In Conquer by Overwork, there's a rolling marble sound at the beginning. This is supposed to pan from right to left to center. The Peacock presented the sound of rolling marbles and some of the panning. There are multiple drums in this track, and the Peacock rendered all of them. Each drum strike was hard, but not sharp. The drum hits sounded like hard thudding. Each drum strike slightly melded with subsequent ones, but there was no muddiness. I listened to several hip-hop songs including Pure Water, New Protect, Reel It In, and Uproar. On each occasion, it was clear that the Peacock rolled off the sub bass. The subwoofer always sounded distant, like it was on the opposite side of a large room. The drums were easily louder and more obvious in the tracks. Vocals were typically 2 steps ahead of instruments and retained their sparkle. I listened to my Sicario playlist. I used these songs to determine if I can hear bass distortion. These are very bassy songs, and I listened from comfortable volume all the way to unsafe levels, and the Peacock never distorted. Overall, the Peacock has the typical planar magnetic bass response. Sub-bass is rolled off. This is true for every single planar headphone I have ever tested. The transience is also quick, again, typical of planar drivers. The Peacock has good bass clarity, similar to other planar headphones. Mid-bass seems to be neutral. Sendy Audio says that the Peacock has warm vocals. My test suggests that the mids are close to neutral and clear. In Orla Gartland's song Why Am I Like This, there's natural vocal grain and sibilance mixed into the track. The Peacock recreated both details. It marginally accentuated vocal sibilance but kept the vocal grain seemingly neutral. Orla's voice was easily 1 to 2 steps ahead of the instruments. I could hear the minor perturbations in some of her singing. The drums and guitar appeared to have correct timbre. There was some melding between them, but I could still hear their individual notes whenever I wanted to. In Want You Back by Haim, the Peacock demonstrated again that it does very slightly accentuate sibilance. At 8 seconds into the track, she says the word "we" and drags it out, making it sound gravelly. The Peacock perfectly recreated this detail. There are 2 other backup vocalists in this track, one in the left and the other in the right ear cups. The Peacock clearly, without difficulty, separated all 3 vocalists. When the instruments played at maximum, the backup vocalists' voices melded into one. When the instruments played slower and lighter, the separation and clarity among all vocalists immediately returned. The timbre of instruments appeared to be accurate. There was some melding among them, however. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the Peacock recreated the ukulele and drums with correct timbre. The bass seemed a little distant. The primary male vocalist's voice appeared smooth, and his sibilance was not emphasized. There is a backup vocalist in this track. His voice is layered beneath the primaries. Most headphones and IEMs cannot separate the two. The Peacock could not either. Between 1 minute and 10 and 1 minute and 20 seconds, there are sharp intakes of breaths. The Peacock perfectly rendered this detail. Overall, the mids appear to be neutral or close to it. Vocal grain is not emphasized. Sibilance has a very minor emphasis. If your music has either sibilance or grain, you will probably hear it in the Peacock, but this headphone will not exaggerate. Take, for example, the vocal presentation of the Blonde BL03 or the Audeze LCD2. Both products shove mids, particularly vocals, into your ears with an emphasis on sibilance. The Peacock, on the other hand, has a more relaxed presentation. Sendy Audio's marketing says that the treble is not harsh. My tests indicate that the treble on the Peacock is ever so slightly emphasized near the upper treble region. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the Peacock allowed the brass and horns to stand out among all the other instruments. They had similar energy as then on the Allo Audio S4X. This means that the higher notes on some of these instruments were slightly emphasized. This was in no way a significant deviation from neutral. I could hear the various group sets but not individual instruments. The Peacock has depth, width, and some verticality. In other words, instruments appeared further out into the wings, some closer to the ears, some behind others, like in an orchestra arrangement, and some sounds came from slightly below or slightly above. This was not a true 3D effect, at least not to the same level as that of the HD800S. But it was more of what some might call immersive. In Flight from the City, the Peacock made the piano sound like it was 6 feet away. Its bassy notes were underemphasized and had quick transients. I could hear the pops and sizzles and the electric buzzing effects. These are details recorded into the bass layer of this track. The cello sounded smooth. There was some melding between it and the piano, but I could easily concentrate on one or the other. I could hear the creaking of wood on the pianist's bench and the shifting of the cello's weight. In Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, the Peacock presented the piano in the right, drums in the left, saxophone center, and the bass a few steps behind. All elements were clear. While there was some melding among their notes, there was no muddiness. I could still concentrate on any one instrument without difficulty. The saxophone appeared to have a bit more energy in the mid to upper treble notes. This was similar to the rendition of the audeze 4X. The saxophone was 1 to 2 steps ahead of the other instruments. The cymbals are struck at different positions, which should result in varied tonalities. The Peacock made all cymbal strikes sound nearly identical, however. Overall, the Peacock has close to neutral treble response. There is a slight emphasis in the mid to upper treble region. However, the Peacock never made any instrument sound harsh or piercing, even at excessive volumes. Sendy Audio doesn't say anything at all about the Peacock's detail retrieval. My experience with this headphone left me a little confused. There were occasions when I thought that the Peacock rendered above average detail. Some instruments and vocals had crisp details. But, on the other hand, there were some occasions when I expected to hear nuanced details, but I didn't. For example, sometimes I could hear the perturbations in vocals, the slight shifting of air as a vocalist is nearing the end of their breath and about to gasp for more so that they can sing the next part. It's a slight detail, and I usually don't find it portrayed in headphones and IEMs, but the Peacock did usually present it. But some details, such as various tonalities of cymbal strikes, didn't come through. I think the fundamental takeaway is that the Peacock provides details for the most part. Some subtle details won't be easily rendered, but this headphone isn't designed for analytical listening. Theoretically, you're supposed to simply enjoy passively listening to your music. Twangs of guitar strings, perturbations of vocals, pops and sizzles, electric buzzing, sharp intakes of breath, shifting of a cello's weight, creaking of wood, multiple vocalists, these are all details that the Peacock recreates with clarity. For a more quantitative test, I used the song New Light by Kazuki. This track has layers of details, including the sound of children playing, wind, rustling of grass, synth, piano, and footsteps. I count the number of footsteps I can hear in the first 60 seconds. The Sennheiser HD800S presents 22 footsteps, the Focal Clear, 18 footsteps. The Austrian Audio HiX65 presents 16 to 17. The Austrian Audio HiX55 presents 16. The Austrian Audio HiX15 presents 13 to 14 footsteps. The hifi Sundara, Avantone Planar, Sifka Phoenix, and Bear Dynamic DT1990 all present 10 to 11 footsteps. The Monolith M1070, M1570, Sifka Robin, and Ultrasone Pro 1480i all provide about 8 to 9 footsteps. The audeze LCD2 Close and the LCD2 Classic each provide 7 to 8 footsteps. The older M1060C provides 7. The audeze LCD1 and the HD6XX present 6 to 7 footsteps. The Neumann NDH20 presents 5 to 6 footsteps. And the Sendy Peacock rendered 8 footsteps. On this scale, I use the HD6XX and the LCD1 as my average performers. Any headphone that renders more or less footsteps gets judged accordingly. Consequently, the NDH20 would be below average on this scale, the hifi Sundara would be above average, and the HD800S would be the king of the hill. The Peacock's performance puts it in the above average category. This headphone does not shove details into your ears. Obvious details are always present. Subtle details are typically audible, but nuanced details are not going to be heard, I think. And by nuanced details, I mean the type that the HD800S, the Focal Clear, and the Austrian Audio headphones can render. That's pretty analytical stuff if you ask me. Regardless, the Peacock's performance is typical of most headphones, dynamic and planar magnetic alike. It's all about tuning. What one company wants to focus on, another won't. Sendy Audio says that the Peacock Soundstage is wide and natural. When we talk about Soundstage, we need to understand how it's made and what actually affects it. DACs and amps don't affect Soundstage. Reviewers keep saying otherwise, but they're also the ones promoting burn-in of DACs and amps, so consider that. Soundstage is the combination of the original recording methodology, the performance of your speakers or headphones, and placement of your speakers and headphones. By recording methodology, I refer to the number of microphones used, how they were placed, and how the track was mixed. If a track was mixed and distributed as a mono recording, well, you're not exactly getting wide soundstage from it, are you? The headphone and speaker tuning, including their physical construction, plays a major role in how soundstage is perceived. Finally, the placement of speakers and headphones will affect soundstage. Put good speakers in a 4x4 room and you'll get a box-like rendition. Put the HD800S on your head backwards or tilted and you'll get an erroneous representation of soundstage. So when Sendy Audio, or anyone else for that matter, claims that their headphones have wide or natural soundstage, it's all marketing mumbo-jumbo. You have to know your music and your setup. Having said all of this, I can conclude that based upon my testing, the Peacock has above average soundstage. It's not close to the HD800S, but it's noticeably wider than many audiophile headphones. Just as with my detailed rendition test, I have a scale for soundstage. Let's talk about other headphones first on my soundstage scale. The audeze Mobius and all Beats headphones have claustrophobic soundstage. The Neumann NDH20 and the ATH M60X from Audio-Technica have below average soundstage. The HD6XX and the LCD1 have average soundstage. The Sifka Phoenix, Emotiva GR1, and Ultrasound Pro 1480i have average to maybe above average soundstage depending on the particular recording. The hifi Sundara, Avantone Planar, Austrian Audio Hi X55 and X65, and the LCD2 Classic have above average soundstage. The hifi Diva has wide soundstage. The HD800S has super wide soundstage. On this scale, I use the HD6XX and the LCD1 as my average standard. Anything above or below is judged accordingly. Consequently, I would say that the Peacock has above average soundstage. It's as wide as the Avantone Planar and maybe as wide as the hifi Sundara. Moreover, the Peacock presents width, depth, and some verticality. It's not like the rendition of the HD800S, but it's not the typical stereo left and right recreation either. What was Sendy Audio aiming for? Like most hi-fi brands, their marketing is difficult to understand. Their use of vague terminology is unhelpful, and their lack of specific information makes us guess. If you look at the Peacock's frequency response graph, you will get the impression that it has elements of neutrality. I think that's probably true. The Peacock, just like every single planar magnetic headphone I've heard so far, has a sub-bass roll-off. Some planar headphones have more, some less, but the Peacock's performance in this regard is par for the course. You will get more accurate bass rendition from dynamic drivers. But mid-bass on the Peacock seems to be neutral or very close to it. This headphone has good separation of sub-bass from mid-bass, though nothing groundbreaking. Indeed, the Austrian Audio Hi X55 and X65 have far clearer bass, but that's the case when I compare the Austrian Audio gear to nearly every headphone. Bass transients on the Peacock is typical planar. In other words, fast. The mids are neutral, or very nearly so. Vocals stand 1 to 2 steps ahead of instruments. If your recordings have sibilants or vocal grain mixed in, the Peacock will recreate those details, but it won't shove them into your ears. Timbre always seems to be correct in the mids region. Treble on the Peacock seems to get a slight emphasis around the mid to upper treble region. It's not a significant bump. In fact, I'd say it is similar to what the oriolus S4X does. Treble instruments are clear, but never harsh or piercing. The Peacock has above average detail retrieval and above average soundstage. Is the Peacock true neutral? No, but it's close enough to fudge. I cannot say that the Peacock is analytical. It simply is not. Nor is it intimate or warm sounding. Nor is it balanced sounding. It's just not any of these things. Instead, I think the principal experience I've had is that the tuning appears to be neutral or heavily leans in that direction. I'll give you a few examples. The X55, X65, and the X15 are all analytical sounding headphones. I would say that the DT990 and the 1990 fall into the same type of category. The HD6XX, the LCD1, NDH20, and the Philips Fidelio X2 are warm-sounding or intimate-sounding headphones. The M1570, LCD2, Sifka Phoenix, these are all balanced-sounding headphones. The Hi-Fi Man Sundara, Avantone Planar, Allo Audio headphones are neutral. So when I say that the Peacock is not analytical, warm-sounding, or balanced-sounding, hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. This might be a good time to discuss the Peacock's frequency response graph, by the way. I do not promote looking at graphs to determine how something sounds. FR graphs are not a reliable source of information, at least not if you intend to use them as the only basis to make a decision. FR graphs can give you a general idea, but never a complete picture by themselves. The Peacock's graph gets some discussion, at least among HeadFi users. Some people think that the graph shows that the headphones suck. I mean, look at all those peaks and troughs. I asked Sendy Audio about these graphs. They told me that they did not tune the Peacock from measurements. They relied principally upon their ears and how the headphones performed while listening. So if you see ups and downs on the graph, so be it. Look, after about a month of listening to the Peacock, running them through my typical gamut of tests, and comparing them to all manner of headphones, I can confidently say that I never heard any particular oddity in the signature. I cannot say the same thing for the NDH20 or the DT1990. For instance, the NDH20 always makes pianos sound like they're being played from within a shipping container. The DT1990 distorts audibly in sub-bass in bass-heavy tracks at higher volumes. The Peacock doesn't do anything of the sort, and in fact, it is extremely rare for me to find a headphone that does distort or cause odd inflections in timbre or pitch. So, if you're looking at the Peacock's FR graph alone, I think you're doing yourself, others, and this headphone some disservice by calling it trash because of the recorded graph performance. Alright, so what about the Peacock's performance compared to other headphones? I always compare in my reviews, and that's exactly what we're going to do with the Peacock. However, that will be in part 2 of this series. In the next video, I will put the Peacock head-to-head against other uber premium headphones. We will talk performance so that you get a better idea of where this headphone fits into the grand scheme.